need a home and a husband?" the rancher asked the old Apache woman. The sun had been climbing steadily over the desert horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and pale gold. On the wide, dusty ranch that stretched as far as the eye could see, the land was quiet except for the low rustling of dry grass and the occasional distant call of a hawk. The rancher, a man in his 50s, was already out among his cattle. He walked with steady steps, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust. His hands were rough and strong from years of work, and his face, lined with wrinkles and sunburn, told stories of hard days and colder nights. He had lived on this land for most of his life, learning to read the sky, the wind, and the subtle sounds of the desert. But despite the life he had built, there was an emptiness in his home, a quiet that the chatter of animals and the creak of wooden fences could not fill. That morning, as he moved along the edge of the pasture, he noticed something unusual. A figure appeared near the distant ridge, moving slowly but with purpose. It was an old woman, her posture slightly bent with age, but her steps careful and steady. Her hair, streaked with silver and black, was tied back neatly, and her eyes held a sharp, clear focus that made it clear she knew the land well. She was an Apache woman, a survivor of times that had been unkind to her people. She walked in the shadow of the ridge, almost blending with the rocks and shrubs, but the rancher's trained eyes could see her clearly. Curiosity tugged at him. Most people in this part of the country avoided his land. They feared the harshness of the desert, the unpredictability of the terrain, or the wild animals that roamed the open plains. But this woman did not appear afraid. She seemed to understand the rhythm of the land, the way the wind shifted across the dirt, the placement of stones and plants, as if she had walked these trails many times before. The rancher paused, leaning on the fence post, watching her move. There was something in her steady, unhurried pace that made him think she was not a stranger to hardship, not someone who would run at the first sign of trouble. He called out, his voice carrying across the empty expanse. "Hello there," he shouted, hoping she would hear him. The wind carried the words, and for a moment she stopped and looked his way. Her eyes met his across the distance, calm and assessing. She gave no sign of fear, no hurried retreat. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, as if considering whether or not to approach. The rancher felt a strange mix of surprise and curiosity. It was rare to see someone, especially an older woman, moving alone through the desert without hesitation. He stepped closer, his boots crunching against the dry ground. "Do you need a home and a husband?" he asked suddenly, the words escaping his lips before he could think better of them. It was a blunt question, one that he had never asked anyone before, but something about this woman, her independence, her quiet strength, made him wonder. She paused again, this time closer, her eyes studying him as carefully as he had studied her. The old Apache woman did not answer immediately. She simply observed him, her gaze steady and knowing. The question, though strange, did not seem to offend her. Instead, it was met with a quiet patience, as if she had seen far stranger things in her long life and understood that people often spoke before thinking. After a long moment, she finally spoke, her voice calm and soft but carrying a firmness that demanded respect. "Why do you ask?" she said. The rancher shrugged, unsure how to explain. "I've lived here a long time," he said. "The land is mine, but I have little company. Life is easier with someone to share it with, someone to talk to, someone who understands the land." He looked around at the wide, empty spaces that stretched endlessly under the hot sun. "I thought maybe you might need a place to stay, a place to call home, and perhaps a companion." The woman's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in thought. She stepped closer, her sandals brushing the dusty earth, and studied the man more carefully. There was a loneliness in his eyes that was honest and open, not hidden by pride or pretense. Yet she also saw the caution, the wariness of a man who had endured life's hardships and carried them quietly in his heart. She could sense that he was not used to being around people like her, that he had likely spent years speaking mostly to the land, the animals, and the wind. "I have lived alone for many years," she said finally. "I know how to care for myself. I know the desert and the storms, the plants and the animals. I do not need someone to look after me, nor do I need to be tied to another." Her words were gentle but firm, and they carried the weight of experience. She had survived things most people would not imagine, and she valued her independence above all else. The rancher nodded, trying to hide his surprise at her straightforwardness. "I didn't mean to offend," he said quickly. "I only wondered. I only thought—" He trailed off, unsure how to finish the thought. It had been so long since he had spoken openly to another person, especially someone who understood the harshness of the land as she did. "I thought maybe life could be better with someone by your side, someone you trust." The woman studied him for a long while, and then, slowly, she smiled. It was not a wide smile, but it was warm, like the first touch of sunlight after a long, cold night. "Trust is earned, not given lightly," she said. "And home is more than a building. It is where your spirit feels safe. Your offer is generous, but I am not sure you understand what it means to live the life I have lived." The rancher felt a pang in his chest, a mixture of admiration and humility. He had not expected wisdom in such a quiet voice, nor had he anticipated the depth of understanding that came from a life shaped by survival and independence. "I may not understand everything," he said honestly, "but I cannot offer what I have. I cannot offer shelter, food, and protection, and perhaps company, if you wish it." The woman looked out across the fields, her gaze sweeping over the rugged landscape. She seemed to measure the distance between her life of solitude and the possibility of something new, something unfamiliar. For decades, she had relied on herself alone, moving with the land, living by the rhythms of nature. And now, here was a man offering her a different kind of life, one with walls, a roof, and another person's presence. It was tempting, in a quiet, curious way, but she was cautious. "I will think about it," she said at last, her voice calm, yet carrying the weight of her decision. "I must consider what it means to live in a home that is not my own, to share space and life with another. It is not an easy choice, even when the offer is kind." The rancher nodded, understanding. He knew the value of patience and the importance of respect. "Take your time," he said. "There is no rush. The land will be here, and I will be here. You may come and go as you wish." The woman nodded once, a small gesture that spoke volumes. She turned slowly, walking back toward the ridge, her steps deliberate and unhurried. The rancher watched her go, feeling a strange mixture of hope and uncertainty. He did not know if she would return, or if his offer would ever be accepted. Yet, in that quiet moment, he felt a connection, one that went beyond words, beyond questions of home or companionship. It was a recognition of shared solitude, of two lives shaped by the harshness and beauty of the desert, and of the possibility that perhaps, in time, those lives could touch each other in unexpected ways. As the sun climbed higher, the rancher continued his work, But his thoughts kept drifting back to the old Apache woman. There was a wisdom in her eyes, a quiet strength that both challenged and inspired him. He knew that life was unpredictable, that moments of connection were rare and precious. And so he waited, patient, hoping that perhaps one day she would see the offer not as a surrender of her freedom, but as the start of a new chapter in a life already rich with experience. The wind blew softly across the desert, carrying the scents of dry earth and distant sagebrush. The rancher listened to the low murmur of the cattle and the whisper of the wind through the grasses, feeling a subtle shift in the day. Something had begun, quietly, between him and the woman, a story of trust, curiosity, and the possibility of companionship. It was a beginning, small and fragile, but full of promise in the vast, endless desert. The old Apache woman returned to the ridge where she had paused earlier, her mind restless with thought. The desert stretched endlessly around her, a sea of golden sand, rocks, and scrubby bushes. She sat on a flat rock, her legs crossed, and let the wind brush against her face. It was a quiet, reflective moment. The rancher's question had stirred memories she had not revisited in years. Memories of her youth, her family, and the land that had both sustained and challenged her. She remembered the village where she had been born, nestled between high cliffs and a winding river. Her family had lived there for generations, their lives closely tied to the earth, the seasons, and the animals. Her father was a skilled hunter, and her mother had been known for her knowledge of plants and healing. From them she had learned how to move silently through the forests, how to find water in hidden places, and how to prepare roots and herbs for medicine. Her childhood had been full of laughter, songs, and stories passed down through generations. Every sunrise and sunset carried meaning. Every wind and bird call held a lesson. But life had not always been kind. When she was still young, outside forces had come to the land. Settlers and soldiers, unaware or uncaring of her people's traditions, had brought change and sorrow. Families were torn apart, villages scattered, and much of the land she had known was taken. Disease and hunger had claimed relatives and friends. She had watched her world shift before her eyes, forced to adapt, to survive. Her youth had been shaped as much by loss as by joy. The woman's memories were vivid, like snapshots in her mind. She remembered one winter in particular when the river had frozen and the snow had fallen heavier than anyone could remember. Food was scarce, and many in the village were ill. She had helped carry water and firewood to those who could not move, offering what comfort she could. It was during that winter she learned the true weight of responsibility, the value of patience, and the strength needed to continue when life seemed unbearably hard. As she sat on the ridge, she thought of her life since then. She had lived alone for many years, moving carefully, taking only what she needed from the land. She had become familiar with the desert, the way shadows fell at different times of day, how to find the hidden springs, and how to predict weather by the smell of the air or the flight of birds. She had learned to rely on herself, and in doing so had found a quiet peace. There was freedom in independence, a freedom that came with both responsibility and solitude. Her thoughts turned to the rancher. She wondered about his life, what stories had shaped him, and what losses he had endured to become the man she had seen earlier. She imagined him as a young man, full of hope and energy, perhaps dreaming of building a family, tending to his land, and creating a life of comfort. Life, however, had a way of changing plans. Perhaps he had loved and lost or faced hardships that had left him cautious and alone. There was a sadness in his eyes, a quiet longing that she understood, even if her own life had taken a different path. The rancher, meanwhile, was at the edge of his home, tending to the small herd of cattle that had become his companions over the years. He moved with a practiced rhythm, feeding the animals, checking fences, and listening to the soft sounds of the land. Yet his mind kept returning to the woman. He imagined her walking along the ridge, her steps careful and measured, her eyes thoughtful and calm. He wondered what she thought of him, of his offer, and of the life he had tried to build. He thought about his own past and the losses that had marked him. A wife, gentle and kind, who had passed too soon, leaving him to face the harsh winters and lonely nights alone. A child, bright and curious, who had brought laughter into the home but had also left a space now filled with silence. He had thrown himself into the work of the ranch, trying to manage the land, the animals, and the fences, but no amount of labor could replace the warmth of companionship. The ranch was safe and he could survive, but he yearned for something deeper, a connection, a shared understanding, a life that was not completely solitary. As the day went on, the woman remained on the ridge, watching the sun climb higher. She thought of the rancher not with suspicion, but with careful curiosity. He had asked a bold question, one that many might have found strange or even foolish, but there had been honesty in his voice. His loneliness was evident, and his offer, though unconventional, had a sincerity that could not be ignored. It was a reminder that people sometimes sought connection, not power or control, but genuine companionship. She remembered other encounters in her life, people who had offered help, friendship, or shelter. Some had asked for trust too soon, expecting obedience or gratitude without understanding. Others had left before trust could be earned. She had learned to measure intentions carefully, to watch actions more than words, and to protect herself and her freedom above all else. Yet there was something different in the rancher's demeanor, a quiet respect, a willingness to give space, and the patience to allow decisions to unfold naturally. As evening approached, the woman finally stood and began to walk back toward the nearby ridge, her mind still full of reflection. She felt the pull of curiosity stronger now, an interest in this man who had survived loss and yet still reached out. She was cautious, but the idea of exploring a different kind of life, even briefly, was intriguing. The desert, for all its challenges, had taught her that change could be both dangerous and rewarding. She had survived before by adapting and learning, and perhaps this was another opportunity to test her wisdom and strength. The rancher, as night fell, built a small fire near the edge of the ranch house. The flames flickered and danced, casting shadows on the dusty ground. He listened to the soft sigh of the wind through the trees and the quiet lowing of the cattle settling for the night. Though the day had been long and hot, he felt a sense of anticipation, a subtle hope that perhaps the woman might return, not just to consider his offer, but to share a moment of life in this harsh and beautiful land. Under the growing twilight, he remembered the stories his own parents had told him when he was a boy, the tales of family, honor, and survival. Those stories had shaped him, teaching him to respect the land, to value honesty, and to care for others. And now, in the quiet of the evening, he realized that life had brought him here, to this moment, with a chance to share the land, the home, and perhaps the heart with someone who had lived a life of strength, resilience, and wisdom. The old Apache woman walking along the ridge finally turned back to glance at the ranch. She saw the small fire burning warmly in the growing darkness, a symbol of the life he had built and the invitation he had extended. And she felt a mixture of caution and curiosity, understanding that the decision she faced was not simple. To accept a home meant more than having a roof over her head. It meant sharing space, life, and perhaps even the rhythms of the heart with another person. Yet she felt no fear, only a quiet consideration. In that moment, both the rancher and the woman were connected by something unspoken, a shared understanding of loneliness, of resilience, and of the subtle, patient beauty of life. They were two people shaped by hardship and survival, standing at the edge of possibility. Though separated by distance, culture, and experience, they both sensed that this encounter could be the start of something meaningful, a connection that respected freedom, celebrated wisdom, and valued trust above all else. The night grew darker, the stars appearing one by one in the vast, endless sky. The desert settled into a calm stillness, the kind that spoke of centuries of survival, of change, and of life continuing despite hardship. Both the woman and the rancher knew that tomorrow would bring more decisions, more reflection, and perhaps the next steps toward understanding each other. For now, there was only patience, observation, and the quiet hope that the bond forming between them could grow in strength and respect. As sleep approached, the rancher looked at the fire one last time and whispered quietly to himself, "May she see what I mean. May she know I only wish for honesty and companionship." And somewhere on the ridge, the old Apache woman also looked at the ranch house, her thoughts turning to possibility, reflection, and the careful weighing of the next step in her long, resilient life. The desert, vast and enduring, held them both in its quiet embrace, a witness to the beginnings of a story that had not yet fully unfolded. The next morning the sun rose slowly over the desert, painting the sky in soft shades of gold and pink. The rancher had already been awake for some time, walking along the fences and checking the cattle. He was used to mornings like this, the stillness, the quiet, and the endless horizon, yet today he moved with a certain anticipation. The memory of the old Apache woman's presence on the ridge weighed on his mind. Her calm and measured gaze had stayed with him through the night, and her words about independence and trust echoed in his thoughts. He knew the day might bring another meeting, another chance to speak with her. By mid-morning she appeared again, slowly approaching the edge of the ranch. She walked with the same deliberate pace, her eyes fixed on the ground in front of her as if she were reading the desert itself. Her sandals made soft sounds against the dusty earth, and the wind played lightly with the edges of her shawl. She stopped a short distance from the rancher, folding her arms as she observed the small homestead he had built. There was a mixture of curiosity and caution in her eyes, a careful weighing of her next move. The rancher approached, this time with a smile that was both warm and tentative. "Good morning," he said gently. "I hope the night treated you well." The woman's eyes lifted to meet his. "The night was quiet, as it always is in the desert," she replied. Her voice was calm but carried a steady strength, the kind that comes from years of surviving hardship. "And you?" "I slept," he said simply. "Though the fire kept me company for a while, I thought about our conversation yesterday, and I realized that perhaps I spoke too quickly. I did not mean to put pressure on you." His gaze softened, and he looked out across the cattle grazing in the distance. "I only wish to offer what I can, nothing more, nothing less." The woman considered his words carefully. She had heard many offers in her life, some generous, some selfish, but few had been honest in the way he spoke. There was no expectation, no demand hidden behind his words. It was rare to encounter someone who could express such simplicity and sincerity. Yet, she remained cautious. "You offer a home and company," she said slowly. "But I have lived alone for many years. I have learned to depend on myself. I am strong in my solitude. Why do you think I need your offer?" The rancher paused, aware that his answer would need honesty more than charm. "I do not know if you need it," he said carefully. "Perhaps you do not. But I have seen the strength in you, and I have seen the wisdom that comes from living so fully, so independently. I think we could learn from each other. The land can be hard, but together we might make it easier, or at least more meaningful." The woman tilted her head, thinking. "Learning is valuable," she said, "and wisdom is not given lightly. But sharing a home, living closely with another person can be a challenge. People often bring expectations, and I have little patience for demands. I am used to my own rhythm, my own way of doing things. Will you allow me that freedom?" The rancher nodded. "Yes," he said firmly. "You will keep your freedom. You will move as you wish, tend to the things that matter to you. The home I offer is not a cage nor a chain. It is only a place to rest, to eat, to shelter from the storms. Everything else is yours to choose." A small, almost imperceptible smile appeared on the woman's face. "You speak differently than many I have met," she said. "You do not assume. You do not demand. That is rare." Her eyes scanned the ranch, taking in the small house, the fenced-in pasture, and the cattle moving slowly in the sunlight. "But I must be honest. I am cautious. I have known people who speak kindly yet act otherwise. I have seen trust broken more times than I can count. I cannot simply accept your offer because it is pleasant to hear." The rancher's expression softened even further. He understood her caution. He had learned, through his own losses, that trust could not be rushed or forced. "I do not expect you to accept," he said. "I only offer. If you wish to visit, to stay for a time, to see if it suits you, that is enough. If you choose to leave, that is also fine. I do not wish to bind you, only to share what I can, if you wish it." The woman looked at him for a long moment, her eyes reflecting the sunlight and the wind-swept landscape. She saw honesty in his expression, patience in his words, and a respect that was rarely extended to her or her people. And yet she hesitated. To accept meant stepping into a life structured by someone else's rules, a life that might feel foreign despite its comforts. But the thought of companionship, of shared understanding, sparked something unfamiliar, yet not unwelcome. "I will consider it," she said finally. "I will visit, perhaps for a day or two, to see if this place suits me. But you must understand, it is not simply your home I must see. It is your character, your spirit. A home is only as good as the person who dwells in it." The rancher nodded, relief and hope flickering across his face. "That is fair," he said. "I would not expect anything less. You will have your freedom, your space, and my respect always." Over the next few days, the old Apache woman visited the ranch occasionally. She observed quietly, learning the rhythms of the place. And she watched the rancher work with the cattle, noting how he moved, how he spoke to the animals, and how he treated the land. She saw his patience, his skill, and his gentle way of addressing challenges. He noticed her careful observations as well, realizing that she was testing him, as much as she was testing the land and the home he offered. Their conversations began to expand beyond the offer of a home. They talked about the land, the weather, the ways to find water and shelter, the animals, and even stories from their pasts. The woman shared lessons from her youth, how to read the tracks of animals, how to find edible plants in dry soil, how to move silently and safely across the desert. The rancher listened with genuine interest, asking questions, and sometimes attempting what she taught him. He found himself learning, adapting, and seeing the land in new ways. In turn, he shared his experiences on the ranch, the knowledge passed down from his parents, the strategies he had developed for surviving harsh seasons, and the wisdom that came from years of labor and solitude. The woman noticed how careful he was, how deeply he thought before acting, and how his respect for the land mirrored her own understanding. A subtle bond began to form, one built not on words alone but on mutual recognition of skill, experience, and resilience. One afternoon, while sitting near a small water trough, the woman spoke softly, almost as if testing the waters of trust. "I see that you care for this land," she said. "Not everyone does. Some only take what they need and leave the rest to waste. You have respect for it. That is rare." The rancher looked at her, meeting her gaze. "I have lived here long enough to understand that the land gives only if we respect it," he replied. "And people, too. They are part of it, part of the life that grows and changes. Respect is earned, and it must be given freely, or it is worthless." A quiet understanding passed between them. The woman realized that this man, despite his years of solitude, had not lost sight of the values that mattered: honesty, patience, and a willingness to learn. She felt a faint stirring of trust, fragile yet growing. The days passed with small interactions: shared meals, quiet walks across the property, discussions about the animals, and lessons about the desert. Each encounter built the foundation of understanding and respect. The woman still kept her distance, always mindful of her independence, but she allowed herself to linger a little longer each day, to watch, to listen, and to engage in the slow rhythm of the rancher's life. By the end of the week, both of them realized that something significant had begun. It was not yet a decision, not yet a promise, but it was the spark of a connection built on patience, mutual respect, and the shared experience of life shaped by hardship and resilience. The rancher felt hope stirring in his heart, tempered by the knowledge that trust must grow slowly. The woman, too, felt the beginnings of curiosity and possibility, tempered by the wisdom earned through years of independence. For now, they continued their cautious dance of dialogue and observation. Words were measured, actions deliberate, and gestures small but meaningful. The desert, vast and silent around them, bore witness to the early stages of a partnership that might one day blossom into something lasting: a companionship rooted in respect, understanding, and the quiet strength of two people who had lived long and full lives. The following morning, the old Apache woman returned to the ranch at sunrise. The desert was quiet, painted in soft shades of gold and amber, and the wind carried a faint scent of sagebrush. The rancher was already outside, checking the fences and inspecting the cattle. When he saw her approaching, a small smile touched his lips. It was not the kind of smile that could be forced. It came naturally, warmed by hope and curiosity. "Good morning," he said softly. "I hope you slept well?" "I did," she replied, her voice steady. "The night is always kind, and the desert speaks in its own way. I heard your fire from afar." Her eyes scanned the ranch house and the surrounding land, taking in details she had not noticed before: the careful way the fences had been repaired, the placement of the water troughs, the paths that led across the pastures. "I thought today we could work together," the rancher suggested. "There are fences to repair, and I could use another pair of hands, but only if you wish it. You are free to come and go as you please." She considered his offer for a moment, weighing the practicality of work against her desire for independence. Then she nodded. "Very well. Let us begin." For the rest of the morning, they moved across the ranch in quiet rhythm. The woman helped mend broken fence posts, carrying wood and hammering nails with steady precision. She taught the rancher how to use certain knots that would hold better in the dry, shifting soil. He watched her carefully, learning her methods and appreciating her skill. There was a confidence in her movements, a patience that came from years of doing hard work alone. "You move well," he said at one point, admiring how she lifted the heavy posts without strain. "I have worked this land for years, but your technique is remarkable." She paused, wiping sweat from her brow. "I have carried heavier burdens than this," she replied. "The land teaches us strength, if we pay attention. It is not only about lifting or pulling, it is about balance, timing, and understanding the ground beneath your feet."
Her words struck him.
He realized that despite the differences in their lives, there was a shared understanding of the land's demands. Both had learned through hardship and patience, though their lessons had come in different forms. The rancher felt respect growing in him, not just for her skill, but for the quiet wisdom that guided every movement she made. By midday, they paused under the shade of a lone mesquite tree. The sun was high, and the desert shimmered in heat. The rancher brought out a small basket of food, bread, cheese, and dried fruit, and offered it to her. She accepted, though only a small portion, as she had long been accustomed to eating lightly. "You eat sparingly," he noted. "You are used to living with little, I suppose?" "I am," she replied. "The land provides what it will, and one must not take more than necessary. Excess leads to weakness, or worse, to carelessness. I have learned to live simply, and I am stronger for it." He nodded, impressed by her practical wisdom. "I have learned something similar," he admitted. "The land can provide, but only if we respect it. Too many take without thought, and it suffers. People, too, must be treated with care and patience, or relationships fail." Their conversation flowed easily, not forced, not hurried. They spoke of small things, the weather, the animals, the way the desert changed with the seasons. Yet, in these small exchanges, trust began to grow. The woman noticed that he listened carefully, that his words carried thought and intention. He was patient and respectful, qualities that were rare in those who crossed her path. And the rancher saw in her not only skill and independence, but also an insight that extended beyond the land, into understanding people and life itself. After lunch, they returned to work, moving through the pastures and inspecting the fences again. The woman pointed out spots where the soil was soft, where a post might lean or break in strong winds. The rancher followed her guidance, learning to see the land through her eyes. Occasionally, she would share a story, how her ancestors had moved across similar lands, how they had survived storms, droughts, and scarcity. He listened, fascinated by the history embedded in her words, the lessons carried through generations. As they worked, small gestures of connection began to appear. She would offer him a tool, or he would bring her water. They shared quiet laughter at minor mishaps, a hammer slipping, a fence post tilting, and the laughter was light, unforced, and genuine. The work itself became a bridge between them, a way to understand each other without rushing or overwhelming the other. The rancher began to notice that her presence made the land feel warmer, more alive, and even the cattle seemed to respond to the calm rhythm she brought. By late afternoon, they had completed most of the repairs. The fences stood sturdy and straight, a testament to their combined effort. The woman wiped her hands on her shawl and looked at the rancher. "You work hard," she said, "and you are careful. Few people take the time to see what must be done before acting. That is a sign of wisdom." The rancher smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest he had not experienced in years. "And you are patient and skilled," he replied. "I have learned much from you, more than I expected." For a moment, they simply stood in the warm glow of the desert afternoon, listening to the soft calls of the animals and the whisper of the wind. It was a peaceful silence, filled with the unspoken understanding of two people who had both endured life's hardships and found resilience within themselves. There was no need for words. The shared work, the small gestures, and the careful attention to each other had created a subtle bond. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in deep shades of orange and red, the woman finally spoke. "I see now that this place could be more than just a shelter," she said softly. "It could be a place to share knowledge, to learn from each other, and perhaps even to find companionship. But I am still cautious. I will not give my trust lightly." The rancher nodded, understanding fully. "I do not ask for your trust as a gift," he said gently. "I only hope to earn it one day at a time. If you stay, you will keep your freedom. Nothing will be taken from you that you do not wish to give." Her gaze softened slightly, and for the first time, she allowed a hint of warmth in her eyes. "Well, we shall see," she said. "Time is the true test. Actions, not words, will show me what is real. I am willing to observe, to participate, and to learn. But the decision remains mine." The rancher felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had hoped for more than mere courtesy. He had hoped for honesty, patience, and a willingness to engage. And he had found it, not in grand gestures, but in simple acts of shared labor, observation, and respect. It was a foundation stronger than any words could build. That evening, they shared a simple meal near the small fire outside the ranch house. The air was cool, the stars beginning to appear one by one in the endless desert sky. They spoke of small stories from their pasts, lessons learned, moments of joy, challenges faced. The conversation was easy, natural, and the silence between words was comfortable, not awkward. For the first time in many years, the rancher felt the quiet warmth of companionship without expectation, the calm presence of someone who understood the rhythms of life. And the woman, too, felt a rare sense of connection, a cautious hope that perhaps there was a place where she could share knowledge, experience, and moments of life without losing her independence. As the fire crackled softly and the night settled over the desert, both of them understood that their bond was growing slowly but surely. It was not yet love, nor even full friendship, but it was something just as important: mutual respect, shared understanding, and the first steps toward trust. And in that vast, quiet desert, they both felt a small, steady sense of belonging, a feeling that perhaps together they could face the challenges of the land and the years to come. The morning sun rose slowly over the desert, casting a warm glow across the ranch. The land, stretching endlessly into the distance, shimmered with the heat of early day, and the soft wind carried the scent of dry earth and sagebrush. The rancher was already awake, moving quietly through the small courtyard and checking on the animals. His mind, however, was not only on the cattle or the fences. It lingered on the old Apache woman, wondering if today might be the day she would make her decision. She arrived not long after sunrise, walking with calm confidence. Her movements were deliberate, as if each step had a purpose beyond merely reaching the ranch. When the rancher saw her, he offered a gentle smile. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, unspoken yet deeply felt, as though both of them understood that the day carried a quiet importance. "Good morning," he said softly. "I hope your night was peaceful." "It was," she replied, her voice calm and measured. "The desert is always generous with quiet and reflection." "And yours?" "I slept well," he said, though I kept thinking of the work we have yet to do and of the conversations we have shared. The woman nodded, looking around at the ranch. Her eyes lingered on the fences they had repaired together, the water troughs, and the small house that had been part of the ranch for many years. She saw the care taken in every detail, the way the garden beds had been arranged, the paths that allowed easy movement for the cattle, and even the small fire pit where they had shared quiet meals. Everything spoke of thoughtfulness, patience, and respect for the land. "I have watched your work," she said after a pause, "and I have observed how you care for the land and the animals. It is clear you do not act without thought. That is a quality I value greatly." The rancher felt a warmth rise in his chest. "Thank you," he said, "and I have learned much from you as well. Your wisdom and skill have been invaluable. I respect the life you have lived and the lessons you carry." For a long moment they stood in quiet reflection. The desert stretched around them, vast and unchanging, yet filled with the small signs of life. The soft rustling of grasses, the low calls of distant animals, and the shifting colors of the sky. It was in this quiet, patient space that the woman finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. "I have thought much about your offer," she said, "and I have come to a decision. I will accept your home, not as a surrender of my independence, but as a choice to share life with someone who respects it. I will remain cautious as I must, but I am willing to see what this partnership can become." The rancher felt a profound relief, tempered by a quiet joy. "I will not take your trust lightly," he said. "You will have your freedom, your space, and my respect in all things. I hope only to provide companionship, not control, and to offer what comfort I can without expectation." The woman nodded, her expression thoughtful. "That is acceptable," she said. "I have lived a long life with careful observation. I know that true companionship is earned through actions, not words alone. And I see that you are patient and honest. That is why I am willing to stay." The day unfolded slowly, filled with gentle activities. They walked together through the pastures, checking on the cattle and observing the small signs of life in the desert. The woman showed the rancher hidden springs and the best spots to find edible plants, while he shared techniques for mending fences, tending to animals, and predicting weather changes. Their work together was seamless, a combination of skill, observation, and growing mutual respect. As the afternoon sun climbed high, the woman made a small but symbolic gesture. She knelt near one of the garden beds and began planting seeds. Her hands, skilled and careful, pressed the seeds gently into the soil. "This is a place where life can grow," she said quietly. "And I will add to it, not only with plants, but with my presence, my knowledge, and my care." The rancher watched her, deeply moved. "It is beautiful," he said. "A symbol not only of growth in the garden, but also of our shared efforts and understanding." The woman nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "I have always known that life is not about possession, but about cultivation, of land, of knowledge, and of relationships. This garden is a promise that I am willing to invest in what we can create together, without losing myself." Evening came and the sky was painted with shades of deep orange, purple, and pink. They sat together near the fire pit outside the ranch house, sharing a simple meal. The flames flickered gently, casting long shadows across the courtyard, and the desert settled into calm stillness. They spoke of small stories from their past, reflecting on moments of survival, lessons learned, and experiences that had shaped them. The conversation flowed naturally, filled with warmth and ease. The rancher realized how much he had missed this quiet companionship. the gentle understanding that comes not from words alone, but from shared experience and trust. The woman, too, felt a sense of belonging she had not felt in years. Here she could be herself, respected and free, yet also connected to someone who valued her presence and wisdom. As night deepened and stars appeared one by one in the vast sky, they shared stories of their ancestors and the land. The woman spoke of her tribe's traditions, the way the stars had guided hunters for generations, and the lessons embedded in every stone, plant, and animal. The rancher listened with awe, appreciating not only the knowledge she shared, but also the depth of history and experience it carried. In turn, he shared memories of his own family, the stories of his parents, the lessons passed down from childhood, and the ways he had learned to survive and thrive on the ranch. Together they found common ground, a shared respect for the past, and an understanding of how their experiences shaped their present. Later, as the fire burned low and the night air cooled, the woman stood and walked slowly to the edge of the garden she had planted. She touched the soil lightly, as if confirming her promise to nurture both the land and the life she had chosen to share. "This garden is more than plants," she said softly. "It is a symbol of patience, care, and hope. It is a reminder that life can grow even in the harshest places, if tended with respect." The rancher joined her, placing a hand gently on the back of a chair nearby, as if acknowledging the weight of her words and the truth they carried. "And we will tend it together," he said, "as we tend this land and this life, not as owners or masters, but as partners, each giving what we can while respecting what is sacred to the other." She nodded, her eyes reflecting the glow of the fire and the fading colors of the sunset. "Yes," she said, "that is how it must be. And I will hold to this, not out of obligation, but because it is my choice. Freedom and respect, alongside companionship, this is what I seek. And this is what I have found here." The night grew deeper, and the desert settled into its familiar quiet. Both the rancher and the woman felt a calm satisfaction, a sense that something rare and precious had begun. It was not a life without challenges, nor was it free from the difficulties of the land, yet it was a life chosen consciously, built on patience, trust, and understanding. The rancher looked at the stars above, thinking of the long years he had spent in solitude, and now of the companionship that had entered his life. He realized that true connection did not demand perfection, only honesty, respect, and shared effort. And in the woman's quiet presence, he found the balance he had long sought, a partnership that honored both independence and closeness. The woman, too, felt the weight of her decision settle comfortably around her. She had chosen to accept a home not as a surrender, but as a thoughtful extension of her life. She had planted the garden, offered her knowledge, and allowed herself to share the rhythms of her days. She was cautious still, as she always would be, but she felt a rare sense of contentment and hope. As the fire dwindled and the night became complete, they sat together in silence, listening to the desert, the whisper of the wind, the distant calls of animals, and the quiet pulse of life that continued even in solitude. In that quiet, both felt a deep understanding. That connection, patience, and respect could create a life richer than either could have imagined alone.